And for more on this, let's bring in Lori Pratt, Executive Director of Gun Owners of America, and Lori Haas. She is with the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence and Virginians for Responsible Gun Laws. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll start with a simple question. You both, I'm sure, have heard the story. David Lee Miller just reporting it there for us. Should Putnam County be forced to release these names? Larry?
Well, we're very much opposed to that. We don't see the public's interest in this. It's not as if these people have committed a crime. We do publish the names of sex offenders because they did commit a crime. But we shouldn't be viewing people who've bought a gun and have gotten a permit, as in the case of New York, as having committed a crime. This was done in Virginia some years ago, and the backlash was so considerable that law was passed prohibiting the publication of this kind of information. Doesn't mean that somebody couldn't find out about a particular individual, but to just make it so that any stalker can find out where his ex has ended up, what her new address might be, that's really dangerous.
Yeah, where her address is and whether or not she has a gun to protect herself. Lori, what do you think?
Well, I think this discussion and debate is up to New Yorkers and New York state law and for those in New York to figure it out. But it really is an unnecessary distraction to the real issue at hand, and that is the gun violence that increases in this country when we have porous laws like no background checks on unregulated sales, and we need to do a better job with the task at hand, and that's to prevent guns from getting into the wrong hands.
But Lori,
New York has a wonderful process. New York has a licensing and registration process that's thorough. It
and
obviously
Lori,
works.
And as part of that process that you're speaking of, which is the bigger picture for this topic at hand, should those names be published in a newspaper?
Well, I don't necessarily personally have a problem with those names being published. Maybe some of the persons who registered and got licensed do. I'm kind of confused at the Mr. Pratt in the gun lobby for having a problem with gun owners being, put in the public purview when in fact they've constantly argue that gun ownership is safe. These are licensed people. They've been through a process and they're law-abiding citizens. So owning a gun should make them safe.
But
I
Larry,
don't understand what the publication would make them put them in danger.
And perhaps, Larry, you can explain. How would that put them in danger?
Well, perhaps more specifically, the people in danger are the neighbors who don't show up on the list, who evidently don't have a gun. For a home invader, that's a much safer target than the person who has a gun listed at his house. Certainly, if the gun owner doesn't have a carry permit and he's away from the house in New York, then a criminal would know that there's probably a gun inside that he can break in. If no one's there, he's pretty safe. But otherwise, the neighbor with no gun is very much at risk. So this hasn't done any public service. It's put a lot of people at risk. And I wonder if the paper is going to pay for the damages that might occur when somebody is harmed because of what this newspaper has done.
And that's what I was wondering. Regardless, let's take both scenarios. You have a gun or you don't have a gun. You're on this list. Say something happens where someone decides to break into your home to steal a gun because they know now that you have one there, or they decide to break into your home because they now know that you don't have a gun to protect yourself, and there's an incident in the home and something happens. Someone's injured or hurt or perhaps killed. Then who's held liable? The county that released the names? Then are they held liable? The newspaper itself for releasing the names to begin with? It just creates a trickle-down effect as well.
I think that's right. Now, the county might claim sovereign immunity, legal fiction that politicians have created to protect themselves against the consequences of their own actions. But the newspaper doesn't have that, and that might make the newspaper particularly vulnerable, as I think they should be. And I don't think they considered that when they did it. I'm not really sure what led them to do it. Maybe the conviction that gun owners are evil people and we need to expose them for the terrible people that they are. There certainly doesn't seem to be any logical reason for having done this, and I hope that there's no reason to sue the paper, but if God forbid something were to happen, I hope they lose it all.
Lori, I do want to ask you this finally, and then we have another topic that we're going to move to.
Okay.
What about the rights of a private citizen?
Well, I understand the rights of citizens to own guns, and in the state of New York, they're licensed and they're registered, and they knew this when they purchased the gun, that this was in fact public information. It's always been public information in the state of New York. So to suddenly have a problem with it being public information, I'm a bit confused, you know, at the issue at hand, whereas I think, again, I would like to say it's a distraction to the real issue at hand. Mm-hmm. How are people who are dangerous, who are felons, and who are getting guns illegally, how is that going on? What are we doing about that? You know,
and they're not going to be on that list.
Not something.
And perhaps knowing that it's public information and knowing that it's going to be plastered all over a newspaper publicly are two different things. I want to move to this, though.
Yes.
There's also some new controversy now over a Des Moines Register column that calls for violence against the NRA and Republican leaders in advocating for, quote, radical measures to end gun violence. Has this conversation just simply gone off the rails? I want to pull up a couple of quotes from this opinion piece as it appeared. The person that wrote it, his name is David Krall. I have a copy, or I'm sorry, Donald Krall. And in it he said, you know, one of the disturbing quotes, just one of them, he said, declare the NRA a terrorist organization and make membership illegal. Hey, we did it to the Communist Party, and the NRA has led to the deaths of more of us than American commies ever did. I would also raise the organization's headquarters, clear the rubble, and salt the earth, but that's optional. Make ownership of unlicensed assault rifles a felony. If some people refuse to give up their guns, that, quote, prying the guns from their cold, dead hands thing works for me. Larry?
That is so over the top that I had to laugh when I'd read that before, but it's still funny that somebody is so foaming at the mouth that an editor didn't catch that before it was published, that they are exposing themselves for the Looney Tunes that apparently they are, if they really think that way. That is so amazing. When you look at those who own firearms legally in this country, they're the choir boys of our society. These are the men and women who do not commit crime. Those who are licensed to carry, such as those in New York, commit many fewer crimes than police do.
Lori,
so for
I'm sorry, I want to bring
amazing.
Lori in here because we're running out of time. Lori, you know, he said throw out the Second Amendment, I'm paraphrasing, also called for violence specifically against Mitch McConnell and John Boehner, suggested tying them to the back of a vehicle and dragging them through the streets.
Well, I don't condone violence in any way, shape, or form, regardless of who's doing the calling for that violence. It's unnecessary, and I would not call the NRA a terrorist organization. I would call them a greedy organization. They promote policies that sell more guns, and that's the business they're in. They want to sell more guns, they want to make more money, and they are, frankly, you know, don't seem to care about the policies that lead to more deaths in this country. Those states with better gun laws have fewer deaths, and those states with the weakest gun laws have the most gun deaths. So there is responsible gun ownership, and there is a way to do responsible gun laws, like New York has done with licensing and registration. And I'd like to call for more background checks. We want a background check on gun sales.
All right.
3 out of 4 NRA members want that. 82% of gun owners
Lori,
want that. They
now.
know themselves.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Well,
Okay,
it's a topic that we could continue
me.
to talk about, and the debate continues. Larry and Lori, thank you so much. We appreciate it. Both sides. Thanks.